Hi everybody, this tutorial is about how to create a social research question. There's a lot of things in every neighborhood that we can think about why people do what they do or why groups of people do what they do. Have you ever noticed this? That you're on the subway or you're walking on the street or you're driving in traffic and somebody does something really peculiar and you go, why do you do that? What's up with that? Well, this is a core question in a simple way that sociologists like myself ask is, why do people do what they do? Or why do groups of people do what they do? Social research is the methodology we use to try to understand this type of phenomenon. More than just having our opinion whether, he was being dumb or that was really funny what they were doing. Not doing that. What you're doing is you're actually intensively looking at some social phenomena, some social behavior in a location to try and understand it. In this particular course, there are certain elements that you need to put into your social research question. The first thing is to answer a socially important question or a social question. You have to ask about something you see people do, something you've observed people do, something that's made you wonder about people, or groups of people of what they do. It's a social question. This, generally speaking, is a social phenomenon or a social behavior that you might observe, such as the way people order at a cafe or at a McDonald's. I've had students research the difference between ordering online or on the kiosk versus ordering at the counter. Interesting comparative study. Or the social phenomenon of how people do their garbage and take out their garbage and present their garbage on a given day. Or maybe more important and intense questions like, how do seniors get to the park? Or how do disabled people in my neighborhood access a certain thing? And so on and so forth. So you're after a social research question, a social phenomenon or behavior. Secondly, it's to be in your neighborhood. I'm narrowing your study to your immediate area within 10 blocks. You just were taken out of the university. You were taken out of your place of comfort. And now you're put in the laboratory of your little 10-block neighborhood. Why do I do this? Well, good research, you need to be familiar with the basic happenings in that area. Indeed, in anthropology, an important study in qualitative work, they've argued that you need at least a year and a half of studying within a certain set culture to even begin to observe them effectively. So I've kind of adapted this idea by making you study where you live, because you've already been walking in and out of and living and sleeping and eating and going to the laundry and whatever it is you do in your neighborhood. You already know it. So that's why we're starting with your neighborhood as your area. How large? I would say, give or take, within 10 blocks of your house where you sleep. So some students have studied that, and as they've started with a neighborhood walk around these 10 blocks, some of them will find a certain shop or a cafe or a health center or a park that they find interesting, and it gets even more narrow to just that particular spot that they study. Yes, in the broad metropolitan New York City area of 18.5 million people, you can get to this. Fascinating colleague of yours did exactly this in narrowing her study to one particular traffic island where 6 streets converge like they only do in New York. And on this traffic island, she noticed a bench and a statue and some trees, and it had been turned into a official park. Those of you not from New York City, You may not get this, but in New York City, a traffic island can be a park. Yes, it is. We can use it for that. And in this case, they were. And she noticed that there was a group of gentlemen that consistently gathered in this little traffic island. So she began to observe them, and then interviewed them, and then counted what they did, and found that they had a little neighborhood right around that traffic island, at the diner, at their church, and at their sports club that they went to consistently. A very, what we call a parochial site in their little small parish, a narrow little spot within the grand metropolis of New York City. So for some of you, you might find places like this utterly fascinating, or that you've thought about looking at the past, and this is an interesting thing to observe. So you're going to go into your neighborhood. Then I'm asking you that you must apply your professional field to this. What do we mean by professional field? Professional field is either your career aspiration of what you're going to be, often rooted in your college major, or for some students, it's the job they already have where they work as their professional field. So let me give you a couple of examples. One of them, a guy who was a computer tech major, and he worked for Google, and he lived in Co-op City. For those outside of New York City, what Co-op City is in the Bronx is an apartment, really settlement, sort of middle lower class, give or take, of 28,000 people. So this Google guy lives there, and using his computer skills and savvy, recognized that Google has no idea what the 28,000 people living in Co-op City really do. How did he find out this? Because he knew what was happening at the big Google back in Chelsea in Manhattan. And when he went home on the train and he was at home, he found his 10 friends and said, "What are you doing right now?" And Google has no idea. So a lovely use of his professional field, computer tech, landing slap dab in the apartments in Co-op City. Another one is this. One of your colleagues, she's a middle-aged woman from Gravesend Beach. Those from outside of New York City, Gravesend Beach is out on the shores of Brooklyn, and it was inundated at Hurricane Sandy, and much of the neighborhood was flooded, and there was major damage, and several homes were destroyed. As a civil engineer, she was employed by the city of New York, and her specific job was to work with FEMA in the recovery and management of recovery of those who had lost their homes. And of course, federal FEMA funding had come into New York City for contractors to help rebuild these homes in this destroyed neighborhood. Well, it was not fully destroyed, but several homes were lost and condemned. And to manage if the contractors, many from Long Island, were actually doing the work that was required at Gravesend Beach. And of course, she knew they were not, because this was data she had. As a data analyst, as a civil engineer, a numbers person. And so she thought this would be a great project in my neighborhood because I already have the quantitative data. That was easy. So she then went through and created great charts. We now understood how many homes were being destroyed, how many the bad deals that had been made by contractors, some contractors that got the deals and then went bankrupt, and the homes were never renovated. But the qualitative required her to find out the people and interview the actual people, which became a very sad story. This could happen to you as well in your research, that you come across an unexpected story. Hers was visiting neighbors. Because she had neighborhood cachet already, she was a key consultant to her own neighborhood where she'd grown up. She could go to the neighbors and find out what they knew. And here she found people who had lost their homes and were waiting for their homes to be rebuilt, that were not being rebuilt, living in the living rooms, dining rooms, and basements of her neighbors. The people didn't want to leave where they'd grown up. The story became about sitting around dining room tables and in kitchens and hearing the stories of lost dreams, of our home was destroyed, and about family, not about the numbers. All of a sudden, the numbers of FEMA didn't matter near about, even if I get my house rebuilt, my kids already, they're starting to grow up, and we lost those years. Understanding this is like 4 years after FEMA, so they felt like their lives had been stripped away. So for some of you, you can get to this kind of a story as well because you're in your neighborhood applying your professional field. For some of you, it's going to be a struggle trying to make your professional field fit. But this is what professionals have to do in the real world out there. You've now been given an assignment to find out something social, a social phenomena, a social behavior about individuals or a group of people in your neighborhood, in specific locations, in your professional field. Then you're going to have to count something. So think about something you could count, which is a survey and a frequency count. You can already from the beginning let your mind spin about what kind of survey might I do, and what kind of a thing might I count. And then you're going to have to think about what you're going to observe. What's a social thing, and how might I observe something? Finally, and this is important, you need to create a structured schedule of how you're going to do this. And what I'm going to recommend for you to do is go to the actual dates on the discussion board where we've listed how you structure out your schedule. Go to your syllabus, look at the end date of when your final paper is due, and then work backwards to structure your schedule around the 4 majors so you get this work done. All right? Hopefully this gets you going, and I'm looking forward to your research questions coming at us in a few weeks' time. If you have questions along the way, you know when my office hours are or other times. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.